Academic Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi, who's in Tehran for us this morning. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us today. So Israel has conducted what it describes as precise strikes on military targets in Iran. What's your reaction to those strikes?
I don't know if you introduced all of your academics as pro-UK or pro-US or pro-Israeli academic when you introduced me as pro-Iranian, but I'll leave that aside. I think it's quite clear that the Israeli regime is afraid, and that is why it carried out, or incapable, and that is why it carried out such a insignificant strike. Iran will, of course, retaliate, and the Israeli regime will be punished because the Iranians have pointed out before that every escalation carried out by the regime and every act of aggression carried out by the regime will have to be responded to in order to create deterrence. And one sign of the regime's weakness is something that your reporter refused to say, and that is that the regime is not doing well on the border with Lebanon. And that is why the regime is now changing its objectives in Lebanon. They were supposed to take a significant chunk of southern Lebanon and make that an area where Hezbollah cannot operate anymore. But they're stuck at the border. They've given heavy casualties, especially during the last few days. And so it looks obvious that the regime is weak and vulnerable.
You called this an insignificant strike by Israel. The targets, we're told, were military ones, not oil or nuclear facilities, for example. Given that, what level of response do you anticipate from Iran?
The Iranian response will be significant. It will do more damage to the Israeli regime than the damage that the Israeli regime did to Iran, significantly more damage. And I think in the past, Iran showed that. The Israeli regime is an aggressive regime. It is a brutal and barbaric regime that carries out genocide. So it has to be contained. A regime that slaughters women and children day and night is not a regime that you can reason with. So you have to slap it down. And that's what Iran will do. And we saw last night how insignificant the strike was because the regime knows that Iran's response could be in thousands upon thousands of missiles raining down on the regime at a time when the regime is losing the battle against Hezbollah, which is an ally of Iran, not a proxy, as your reporter likes to call it, is hammering the regime. And in Gaza, after over a year of Holocaust and genocide, the Israeli regime has failed to take that dot on the map. This is the same regime that decades ago took the whole Sinai, went all the way to the Suez Canal. And in 1982, it went all the way and captured Beirut. Now it's stuck on the border in the north. It can't take a dot on the south, called the Gaza Strip. And it knows quite well what Iran can do to it.
The IDF says that these strikes are in response to months of continuous attacks from Iran and after the barrage of missiles that were sent by Iran to Israel on October the 1st. You say you anticipate a significant response now from Iran. So where does this end?
Well, again, I think that very statement or those claims made by the regime show how dishonest it is, just like its history in Palestine, where they displaced the population and think that history began last year ago when they massacred the population for decades, and they say history began on October the 7th. The Israelis actually carried out their first attack with the Americans with a cyber attack against Iran's nuclear program, the first cyber attack in the world. And then they assassinated scientists. I'm sure you remember that. One of those scientists was a colleague of mine at my university who was murdered in front of his wife. And then the Israeli regime, they murdered a number of Iranians who were fighting against ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria because the Israeli regime was supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And of course, there were also, if you recall, other assassinations and drone attacks inside Iran. But when did this current exchange begin? It began when they bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus, killing people. killing Iranians. Iran responded. Then they went and murdered Ismail Haniyeh. He was martyred he was a guest of the president-elect for his inauguration. And he was martyred in a guest house, an official guest house. So Iran responded again. So these are not Iranian escalations. And these are merely Iranian responses to Israeli regime aggression. After what happened at the embassy, Iran said enough is enough. It is no longer going to show strategic patience. From now on, Iran has to punish the regime so that it does not attack again. And so it's up to the Israeli regime. They're going to have to take their punishment, and they're going to have to be hurt. But Iran is prepared to do this again and again because Iran easily outguns the regime. Iran can go on wave after wave, with, as I said, with many thousands of missile strikes and many thousands of drone strikes within days. So it's up to the regime. Do they want to devastate everything and destroy everything? We'll see.
Give us an idea of what people in Tehran are waking up to this morning. What's being reported there about what's happened? What's being said about the extent of the damage, for example?
Well, some people like myself were woken up by the media. RT and Al Jazeera called me, so I got up. I didn't hear anything. My family, most of them didn't know that anything happened. In my part of Tehran, I couldn't hear those explosions that people were talking about. And then later on, others began to say that these were mostly anti-aircraft or missiles or anti-aircraft guns. I don't know, but I don't know of any damage in the city. No one has shown any damage. Most people did not wake up. My relatives and friends, they woke up in the morning and heard the news as they were going to work. So at the moment, there isn't anything for us to see. They may have hit some places in bases in two, three parts of the country. So obviously, we wouldn't have access to those bases. But it doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem to be important at all. And we have to remember that Iran is a huge country. Palestine is very small. So when Iran fires 200 missiles, the whole regime shakes. Next time round, the Iranians could ramp that up to 1,000 missiles at one go. So I think it would be smart for the regime to back down, just as they're rethinking their catastrophic attack on Palestine, on Lebanon, on the Palestinian-Lebanese border. They should rethink their escalation or their exchanges with Iran, because they'll be on the losing end.
Okay, well, Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for joining us there from Tehran.
Thank you.